Good morning to everybody. My name is Michael Place. I'm the energy editor at Business News Americas. We cover electric power news and oil and gas news across the region. I'm based in Colombia. We have a team of 4 other reporters based in Chile, Mexico, and Brazil. What I'm going to do today is run through some basic ideas about what is affecting Colombia's energy sector at the moment, not only in electric power, but also in oil and gas. And then I think I will we'll go into a few details about the major issues affecting both of those sectors. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the region as a whole and some of the main issues that will be affecting energy over the next 12 months going into 2023. So first of all, just talking about Colombia, I guess the sector in general is in wait and see mode. President Gustavo Petro took office in early August, promising to accelerate the clean energy transition and end the country's reliance on oil and gas. But just how far he's going to go, we don't really know. We don't know if he's really going to live up to the expectations that the sector had, which was basically to end oil and gas production sooner than expected, that we previously expected, and really ramp up renewable energy. He's already taken his first concrete step towards, I guess, the transition from a policy standpoint by securing the passage of his tax reform bill through Congress, which was done last night. I'm sure you're all aware. Now he's introduced a new surcharge on income from oil and gas when prices reach certain levels, as well as implementing other taxes on oil and gas production and oil and gas operations. The oil and gas sector has said that this will cost the industry around 6 trillion pesos per year, which is about $1.4 billion annually. The oil sector, the Colombian Petroleum Association, has also said that this will mean that the country will need to rely on gas imports by 2026 and oil imports by 2028. Now, we all know that oil and gas is Colombia's main export industry, and together with coal, it makes up almost 50% of Colombia's export revenue. So the other thing is the impact on Colombia's trade balance. Now, Petro has also said that he's going to end oil and gas licensing rounds. We're seeing some conflicting messages from his cabinet. His energy ministry has been quite steadfast in saying that there will be no new oil and gas licensing rounds, but in recent weeks, that rhetoric has been toned down somewhat. The finance minister has said that perhaps they will open the door to new oil and gas licensing rounds in the future. So I guess the industry is a little bit confused about this, and we expect some news regarding whether or not Colombia will resume auctions in the next few months. Now, Petro has said, obviously, that one half of his energy policy is to end oil and gas licensing rounds. The other half, obviously, is to ramp up renewable energy. And this is no easy task because Colombia has been lagging behind other Latin American countries in terms of renewable energy development. It's only really been in the last 2 years that major investments have been made in the sector, but there is still no real considerable renewable energy capacity on Colombia's grid. And a major reason for this has been delays to transmission projects in the country's north. So it's all well and good to say that you're going to be investing in generation, but if you haven't got the transmission infrastructure in place, then this energy can't be delivered to the grid. And that's a problem that Colombia is facing, especially in the northern area of the country, in La Guajira. There are major transmission delays there, which is causing renewable energy projects to be postponed, and many of those projects which were due online this year are still waiting for connections. So the sector is in wait and see mode about that as well. The other question that the sector has is, if these renewable energy delays continue, then how will Colombia meet demand, because energy demand is expected to continue rising very strongly. We've seen a big rebound since the end of the pandemic, and Colombia needs new thermoelectric capacity. So how will that thermoelectric capacity come online? How will it be contracted? We're still not sure. Petro still hasn't given details about how he plans to do this. We're still waiting for a lot of details from the Petro administration, not only related to oil and gas, but how the renewable energy transition will take place, how new energy will be contracted, what's the role of thermoelectric capacity, and even with renewable energy capacity, how will new renewable energy capacity be contracted? Will there be new options that we saw under the Ivan Duque administration that he held? There were 2 major auctions held, and they were very successful. We don't know if there will be auctions in that style going forward, or if perhaps there will be for example, an energy trading platform where companies can directly go into a platform and trade energy without going through an auction process. And if we'll see private PPAs signed directly between companies, distributors and generators, or major industries and generators. Another major concern in the electric power sector for Colombia is Hidroituango. I'm sure we're all aware of the major problems that project has encountered since 2018. The government and EPM have said that the first 2 turbines will come online this month, at the end of this month. In fact, the developer EPM needs to bring these first 2 turbines on this month to avoid fines from the regulator. But the Medellin mayor, Daniel Quintero, and EPM itself have said that this is unlikely. They're looking to get extensions to the deadline because they say that the project is not ready, and if they bring the turbines on now, perhaps this will present an environmental risk. So we're not sure when Hidroituango will begin producing energy. The deadline, as I said, is later this month, but that's looking increasingly unlikely. So that's basically just a snapshot of what's happening in Colombia's energy sector. A major talking point is battery storage. We see battery storage as a game changer for renewables, which, as we know, are intermittent and not always available to meet demand at peak times. So we're looking in our news and also in our reports at what are the new technologies regarding battery storage, regulations in each country, because we know that some countries are far ahead of others in terms of encouraging investment and creating a stable framework for investment. Who are the major developers? Which are the companies that are investing most in battery storage? What are the key projects and the challenges? Now, some of the companies that we're seeing, for example, that are investing heavily in battery storage are Engie, Enlaza, Copiapó, which is part of Gasco, Statkraft, and Canadian Solar. In Colombia, of course, they're developing a battery storage project in Barranquilla. Another major talking point in renewable energy is offshore wind. Now, we're seeing, especially in the last 12 months, we're seeing major steps taken towards the commercial development of offshore wind. We know that obviously Europe has been a major investment, source or location, I should say, for offshore wind for many years now. But Latin America has really been slow to develop this technology. We're seeing Brazil and Colombia taking major steps to developing offshore wind. Both are implementing regulatory frameworks for the technology. And we're seeing some other countries, such as Argentina and countries in the Caribbean, also taking steps to develop offshore wind. Our aim for the next few months, and what we aim to provide to all of our subscribers, is to keep them up to date with regulations about this sector, and which countries are moving ahead, which countries perhaps are lagging behind, and what investors need to look out for. Now, some of the companies, for example, that we're seeing leading the way in offshore wind are Blue Float Energy from Spain, Celsia, which is obviously a Colombian company, Iberdrola, EDF, and Equinor. Now, most of the projects that we're seeing so far for offshore wind, or the proposals, are in, as I mentioned, Brazil and Colombia. In oil and gas, the big question is, can oil transform Guyana into an economic powerhouse? Guyana and Suriname are two countries that, as we know, that they've been very slow to get on the oil and gas train, and many people would say that they've missed the train, because obviously we're seeing now predictions that peak oil demand could occur this decade, and major investments only being made now kind of seem a little bit counterproductive. But you know, the investors are saying there is still time. There is still time to tap these resources. According to the IEA, Guyana will be the world's third fastest growing oil producer in the medium term, behind only the United States and Brazil. Production in the country is seen climbing by more than 600,000 barrels a day by 2025. And ExxonMobil, which is the major developer in Guyana, aims to ramp up production at Guyana's Stabroek block by around 1.2 million barrels a day from the current level of 350,000 barrels a day. This will make the country the highest per capita oil producer in the world. Offshore oil and gas. Now, this is another theme on a regional level, which is creating a lot of debate. Is it worth it? The investments are a lot higher than onshore oil and gas. We're seeing predictions of peak oil demand occurring this decade. It's really now or never. If countries are going to be developing offshore oil and gas, especially deep water in the region, they need to do it now. There is a need, I guess, in the favor of development for offshore oil and gas. There is a need to transition through natural gas, and for that reason, many countries are seeing opportunities to develop, particularly gas. But obviously, if they're going to be drilling for gas, then there'll be oil as well. So, how they do that, that's the big question. There are political hurdles, as we've seen in Colombia. Petro has been firm in his belief that Colombia will not go forward with oil and gas options. But as I mentioned earlier, perhaps he will step back and allow once again oil and gas options in Colombia, knowing that natural gas in particular is going to be very important as a transition fuel towards renewable energy. Mexico, we're seeing under the current government, Pemex investing heavily in oil and gas production offshore and onshore. But the problem in Mexico obviously is private players and the opportunities that they have, or the lack of opportunities. Venezuela, we're seeing an opening in Venezuela. There is obviously a reapproximation between the Venezuelan government and the US government. How far that goes, we don't know. But we know that there are big interests at play in terms of the US. Big companies like Chevron obviously have major investments in Venezuela, and they want to redevelop oil and gas in the country. And I guess this is becoming increasingly important now with the geopolitical situation in Europe. The fact that Russia has turned off the taps for gas to European consumers, European markets. And these European markets are obviously looking for new sources of gas, and Venezuela obviously is a major opportunity there. And I think the US realizes that. The US obviously as well needs to ensure that it has firm supply of gas, and it can't rely solely on its shale reserves, even though obviously the shale sector in the US has been booming in recent years. Brazil is the clear standout in oil and gas development, and production there is expected to grow by almost 1 million barrels a day by the middle of the decade. And with a new government in place, we know that President Lula is going to obviously implement policies that will favor the state-run company Petrobras, given his left-leaning tendencies. But we don't expect Lula to create an environment that is negative for private investors. We saw under his previous government that he was in fact a champion of private investment, and he proved a lot of people wrong. And he was loved basically by investors around the world. And seen as, quite an open market government, and we think this will continue over the next 4 years in Brazil. Now, there are a couple of segments or a couple of issues which cross between oil and gas and electric power, which we also see being very important over the next 12 months and beyond. Hydrogen, obviously, is one of the big talking points. The pace setters, I guess, or the leaders in hydrogen development in Latin America so far are Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. We're looking at, also the companies and the projects that are driving these investments. Some of the companies are Total Energies, AES, Energix, which is a company from Australia, Enatrag from Germany, and Fortescue, which is another Australian company developing hydrogen in Brazil. LNG, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, natural gas is a big talking point. Where will natural gas come from? The region obviously needs natural gas as a transition fuel towards renewable energy. The war in Ukraine, as I mentioned, has prompted gas prices to spiral amid fears of shortages. And the question is, can Latin America help to fill this void, not only in Latin America itself, but as I mentioned earlier, in the rest of the world, including the US and Europe. Export projects are planned in Mexico. Some of those are Costa Azul, Amigo Sonora. Argentina is planning a gas and duct expansion for exports. Pan America is planning a project to extend a pipeline to Uruguay. And we're also seeing, obviously, a plethora of natural gas import projects in Brazil and in the rest of the region, in Colombia, Dominican Republic as well. So there are quite a few developments in terms of LNG import and export projects. So I guess finally, the issue is how are oil and gas companies navigating the transition in Latin America? As I also mentioned earlier, there's a growing consensus that peak oil will occur sometime over the next 10 years. Some observers are saying that will occur sooner. How are oil and gas companies changing their business models with a view to meeting carbon reduction targets? What are the new technologies that target greater efficiency? The focus on natural gas instead of oil, carbon capture and storage, renewable power generation. That's our focus in General News at the moment, and that will be our focus going forward in 2023 and beyond. So basically, that's a snapshot of where we see Latin American energy at the moment, both in oil and gas and electric power. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much for your time.